Here you are, a 13-year-old kiddo, and you're deaf, you're blind, and you can't move. But the kicker, the bigger impact that really was the one that changed everything was I was completely wiped clean. I have no memory prior to 13. So I didn't know I was a human. I didn't know I was in a body. I didn't know I was in a body that should be able to do anything different than what it was doing. After I was home from the hospital for about 3 months, I had been riding horses, obviously, because that's how I got bit by a mosquito that had it beforehand. We didn't own horses. I was that little barn rat that was at that. Just always wanted to stay there and be there, and it was just kind of my place that I absolutely loved. For the first time, I picked up my hands. I put my hands on the wheels and moved the wheelchair to that stall. This horse should have freaked out because, again, this isn't a therapeutic riding barn. The wheelchair hit the stall door and rattled, but that beautiful being, his name is Schedule A, put his head up and over into my back, pulled me into the stall door as far as I could come, and we just sat there.
Welcome to the Pathways to Wellbeing podcast. Of course, I'm Sophia from Sacred View, but with me today is a very special guest that I'm really excited to get to chat to, the beautiful Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you, Sophia, and I am so glad to be here and with your beautiful community.
Thank you. And I'm really excited because we're talking about our soul's medicine and how we can awaken to our soul's medicine. So let's get started, and tell me first, Michelle, tell us about you, your beautiful self, your amazing journey that led you to where you are now, to helping others heal.
Thank you for that. I'll try to give it in a little tidbit because we'll probably dive into it here and there as we keep going. But I love the word journey, and I love that you use that word because it really is a journey to awaken to ourselves, to our soul's medicine within, and really kind of why we're here and in a body in the first place. And kind of similar to a lot of people, the journey started off pretty rough and with a lot of different places in it that create a lot of challenge, and it's a lot of opportunity for us to feel what I call the grit that's in Earth School. I was, as a young child, I had a lot of issues with my ears and other things like that. So starting at the age of like 6 months old, I started having surgeries and tubes. And by the time I was 13, had 13 surgeries. I believe that you have a background of knowing what those surgeries can entail, especially when you're younger. And that's a part of it. And so hearing was something that was a bigger issue. But in addition to just that medical trauma of that, when I was 13 years old, I was bit by a mosquito that had equine and eastern encephalitis, and that ended up creating a really big problem in my brain. And so my brain, the lining of my brain was swelling, and it dominoed into spinal meningitis at the same time, viral spinal meningitis. And so my brain stem itself and my spinal cord started to swell out as my brain is swelling in, and all of the results equaled a very unhappy nervous system and brain. And I ended up slipping into a coma for about 7 days. And in that coma, a couple of things were happening. One, this was in 1990, so they didn't quite know. Neuroscience was just coming online, all those other things of what was possible. So they were preparing my family for, look, if she wakes up, we don't know what she's going to be. We don't know how this is going to run. And I did wake up, obviously. Hello, here I am. But there was a couple things that happened to my brain with that disease hitting me. Is I was deaf from all of the swelling in my brain. And so I already had hearing issues prior to that, but then it was completely deaf. I was blind, but not blind like in darkness. I was what's called white blindness. And so my eyes were, because the visual cortex is behind where the swelling was, it was like the aperture was completely blown out. And so all of the light had no filter, and it was just so incredibly painful for me. And And so that was happening. And I couldn't distinguish then. Like if you're outside on a really super sunny day, then you come in a dark room, it's that weird lightness. It was like that type of a thing, but incredibly painful. I was also paralyzed from the middle of my back down, so I couldn't walk or move. And I was like a little catch me, pull me. If I sat up straight and nobody pushed on me, I could stay there. But the minute I tried to engage my arms or something like that over, I would fall. And so that was pretty devastating amongst itself. You know, here you are, a 13-year-old kiddo, and you're deaf, you're blind, and you can't move. But the kicker, the bigger impact that really was the one that changed everything was I was completely wiped clean. I have no memory prior to 13. So I didn't know I was a human. I didn't know I was in a body. I didn't know I was in a body that should be able to do anything different than what it was doing. So I didn't know that I should be able to hear or see or move. So all I knew was that I was in an existence that had just pain, complete lack of ability to do anything, and everything was just impacting me. It was painful. And so that's the world that I woke up into, and I had no other point of reference than that. Then the journey that I went on to regain, obviously I'm moving and heal the physical body, which took about 2 years. Horses were a huge part of that journey. But the healing of the physical body was one component. It was all the other types of the emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of me. That was the part that definitely took a much bigger healing journey than the physical form, which within 2 years, there's a whole story in there, but I'll pause there because I feel like that might be a good place to start.
Thank you. And it's just like, wow, like seriously, seriously. Wow, all the things that you've experienced and had to cope with at 13 from a mosquito bite,
Hmm.
from a simple mosquito bite. We really take for granted our lives and how things can change so very quickly. I really, really, really thank you. But now you've gone on and obviously you've healed because you're here and probably continuing to heal because from my experience too, healing is a journey. It's not a one-off. It's a lifelong thing because we've got so much to heal. But what was a, pivotal moment in your life? You really started to embrace your inner healer. Tell us about your inner healer.
I think one of the things that reset, as I call it, some people have said it's like a near-death experience, and I don't quite agree with that from that point of view because it didn't bring me a sense of enlightenment, didn't bring me like a knowing of however, it just wiped me clean. And so one of the things, the huge thing is I didn't know what I didn't know. So the conditioning that this is what a human is, this is what a human isn't, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. All of that conditioning was erased. And so the number one question, once I started to finally be willing to interact with the human world, was why do we do it that way? Because what took over as my five senses were being impacted was the exact same pathways of my energetic senses. And so really feeling into the energetics of the clairsentience, of feeling the world around me. I got very used to tracking people from, I didn't understand distance, but I would track like the three, what I called shadows that I always felt very confused by, very not understanding that almost at attack. I knew they wanted something from me. Well, that turned out to be my mom, my dad, and my sister because they wanted me to be the Michelle that they remembered and not this lump of a thing that was just wailing and guttural pain sounds because she didn't know that she could talk or do anything. But I thought I was communicating with them and talking with them. I was just doing it on a different level. So as I started to come back in, horses became a huge point for me because after about 3 months, I was fine to come home. I was still paralyzed, I couldn't move and other stuff like that. But medically, there was no reason for me to be in the hospital anymore. And so they brought me home, but at that point I was still deaf. I was, mute because I didn't know I could talk, and all the other things were still wrong. I had learned in the hospital to sync to their rhythms, but when I came home, it was just an environment that felt incredibly abusive to me because there was no rhythms that I could sync to. Everybody wanted something from me that I wasn't doing, and I could feel that. You could feel that discrepancy of somebody wanting something from you. And I think that's something that I have really taken with me into the healing work that I do now, is that when we're hurting and we're in pain, we want somebody to help us. We want somebody to help us alleviate that, to take that away from us. And yet, that's not going to come from an outside person. The people around me were so lost in their own pain and their own things that they could not bring that to me. And that's what a horse was able to bring to me that a human couldn't. So it was a really pivotal place to find that escape in that natural world. And I also didn't know to undervalue the natural world. Like, I didn't know that a horse and a human didn't have the same value to me. Everything was the same. And so that's a huge pivotal point that I take into the healing work that I do, because if we start to revalue things based off of what a human wants, we undervalue what our body's going through. We undervalue different things like that, and the resources that can really help us, to support us to step into quote unquote balance and working. I have a story, but it's going to take a bit. I don't know if you want me to.
Okay, please do, because this is an amazing journey. So please do.
Yeah. So after I was home from the hospital for about 3 months, I had been riding horses, obviously, because that's how I got bit by a mosquito that had it beforehand. We didn't own horses. I was that little barn rat that was at that. Just always wanted to stay there and be there. And it was just kind of my place that I absolutely loved. And my parents were grasping at straws. I was basically refusing to do anything because I saw no point. I didn't remember anybody. I didn't honor or value myself as a being or anybody else. And so I was literally a lump that if you moved me, I would move. And I figured out by this point I couldn't fight because my body just kept getting overrode. People would pick me up and move me. And so I just was like a complete freeze state that would allow people to move my hand. So if you picked my hand up and you moved it, I would move. But if you dropped my hand, there was no reason for me to do anything. So they decided to bring me back to the barn. I'm in the US. And so at that time, therapeutic riding was just starting to kind of get its toehold, so to speak. And there wasn't a local barn in my area that did that, but they convinced the owner of the barn that I rode at to let me come back out there, even though I was in a wheelchair, nonverbal at the time, all of these things. They were willing to give it a try. And when we pulled up to the barn and the window was down, I felt a familiar thing. And some people don't know that smell is on a different neuro pathway than your actual cognitive memory. And so in that moment, I had a familiar sense, I remembered something, which is something I had not experienced up until that point. And I was actually willing for the first time to pick my head up and to try to interact with the world around me, which I hadn't been willing to do. This is at this point about 6 months post-coma. And so they put me in the wheelchair and they were wheeling me around to this big center stall, hunter jumper barn. And for those of you who don't know, barns are kind of dark inside. The stalls are on the outside, the center aisle. And so it worked out perfectly for me because it was muted light. It didn't have a lot of light. So I could somewhat, at this point, the swelling had gone down to where I could make out shadows. But 4 stalls down on the left-hand side, there was this beautiful, what looked like to me, this yellow golden highlighter that was sparkling. Turns out it was a dark bay horse in real life, but to my energy eyeballs, it was this beautiful, sparkling golden being that Like I absolutely knew I wanted to go to. And for the first time, I picked up my hands, I put my hands on the wheels and moved the wheelchair to that stall. This horse should have freaked out because, again, this isn't a therapeutic riding barn. The wheelchair hit the stall door and rattled. But that beautiful being, his name was Schedule A, put his head up and over into my back, pulled me into the stall door as far as I could come. And we just sat there. He was holding me with his gorgeous, huge head. And I finally felt a sense of belonging. Like I wanted to actually come into my body to be present in this moment, which I hadn't done since I woke up from that coma. I was just this floating around thing that wasn't zero attachment to this thing called Michelle in this body. And I actually wanted to be in it because I wanted to feel him. I wanted to breathe with him. I wanted to stay absolutely connected to him because I felt for the first time what he was offering me was a true presence. He didn't want anything from me. He didn't need me to change. He wasn't scared of me. He didn't want anything from me other than to be with me. And I had not felt that in the human world until that moment. And so that also became a template for me in creating healing space. It's like we won't show up in it. These scared parts of us, these hurt parts of us, these traumatized, they're not going to show up if they feel like we have an agenda with them, right? If they feel like we're trying to change them or judge them, deem them right or wrong, or we're scared of them, there's no way they won't come to presence. We have to have that beautiful container that Schedule had for me, which is just complete love and acceptance just as we are. And so that's a huge temple foundation, I guess you would say, for me and the healing work that I do within my method.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've got spine chills. Incredible. But I know the wonderful power that the healing power that horses have. I was also fortunate to grow up around horses, and they're incredibly intuitive animals. Well, most animals are, but especially horses and dogs, that, really can tune into what we need when we allow that, when we allow the animals, the horses, to be who they are, then they can
Yeah.
choose to who we are. And certainly I'm just amazed at your experience, Michelle. So thank you so very, very much for sharing it, really. And I want to know more. I really want to know more. But can we go on a little bit to talk about, like you're now a healer, you help other people heal, and you talk about the wounded healing archetype. Right? Tell us about that, and how can people really start recognizing when they're experiencing that wounded healing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. The wounded healer archetypal pattern is quite powerful. It's more than just a story or a myth. It is a true way in which we awaken. And my personal belief is that we are all wounded healers. The question is, are we going to wake up to it and therefore embark in that journey that goes with that? The story that I share, while it was so literal to me, I found over the years, it's actually not, quote, special because it happens to everybody in their own way. We all have ways in which we feel that our voice has been taken from us. We all have ways that we feel that people around us are labeling us and putting things on us, and the way in which the world has pulled the rug out from under our feet, and we feel like there is no way to connect back in to our life the way it was. All of these are ways in which the wounded healer comes into play. And so I'm an astrologer, and I'm also an archetypal consultant through Carolyn Mace. I found these two beautiful things and brought them together. So can I do a little bit of story time, Sophia? Is that okay, about
Oh, please.
the wounded healer archetypal pattern? And the myth that it's on, and a little bit of information about how you can see this in your own light. So I'd love to just invite everybody to feel into their own journey that is their life path in this lifetime, and realize that there's probably a theme in it. And the wounded healer pattern, it was really solidified through the myth of Chiron, which I'm sure you know this, but it's always kind of nice to bring it into everybody's awareness. And from the point of view that I feel is most helpful for us in the healing journey, because it can get, I think one of the things we had chatted about beforehand is it can get awfully, what's the word, idealized. People can like get very like, oh, my wounded healer within me, and they get stuck there. And really, we don't want to get stuck there, because that just gets us stuck in the wound and then stuck in the victim. And there's actually a very different trajectory that it's trying to bring us on. So the myth of Chiron is that he was born from Saturn, which is Kronos at the time, and his mom was a nymph. And so Kronos, you know, as it goes, he would eat his and devour his kids, and he was on the warpath looking for Zeus, because he had known that Zeus existed, but he was trying to find him. And when he was down there, this nymph caught his eye, and he was like, ooh, I want some of that. And so in that process, she was like, oh, I don't want, the feeler was like, no, thank you. I don't want this guy who eats his babies. You know, this does not sound good. So she turned herself into a horse so that she could run away. And then Kronos turned himself into a stallion and, sorry, trigger warning, but raped her. And so that's the first part of this quote unquote pattern, is it's born from our original wounds, come from intergenerational trauma that we don't have control over, from wounds that have happened outside of our own personal life that get passed down to us, and wounds where people are trying to maybe override each other, where they have been devalued, something like that. So Philaura gives birth to now Chiron, and he comes out a centaur. So he's half god, half mortal. And the human part of him is the god part, and the horse part of him is the immortal part. In her distress of seeing him as a centaur, which were a people that once were they were the philosophers, they were the ones that they went to. Well, their tribal lands had been gobbled up by civilization and put out. And so the centaurs lost, they were removed from their wisdom, they were removed from their land. And as a result of that, they lost their civilization, they lost their value and their honoring of themselves. And so all of these layers are in that wounded healer myth. And in that moment, instead of saying to the gods, please help me with my child, she says, I can't take this enough, turn me into a tree. And so they turn her into a tree. Instead of helping him, he gets tossed into a cave, and somebody comes along who was a servant to Apollo, finds him and brings him to Apollo. And Apollo is the sun god. He's the god of healing. He's the god of philosophy. He's all of these things. And so he took Chiron in and he started to teach him all these things. So that's the first part of the myth. And if we feel into our world, this is intergenerational trauma, right? This is us getting removed from the wisdom that's already within us and not being seen for the value that we are, the amazing gift that each one of us has, and that gift getting kind of, tossed away. And for lack of a better word, the parents then are absent. One decides to turn herself into a tree because she can't deal with her own trauma, and the other one's off on his quest to kill more of his kids. And so in this, the Greeks, they have a way of putting things in quite a lovely term. And so here's this little baby who then is able to be absorbed into the sun god and into that ability to learn and to grow. And so he starts off on that thing. And he at this point, he would consider himself more of a healer. Right? He's not quite the wounded healer yet, but yet there's wounds sitting in him that he doesn't quite have awareness of their impact on him yet. And that's us, right? We have these intergenerational wounds. We have these different ways in which we feel separated. Parts of us feel like have been left in a cave. Parts of us feel like they're being honored and valued. And yet we're kind of getting through it. We're like, okay, it's not that bad. We can keep trucking. We can keep doing. And as you fast forward in his myth, he's then trying to broker a way to bring the centaurs into peace. And so he and his buddy Hercules at this point are working together. Hercules has just killed the Hydra. He has his arrows dipped in the blood. And, a fight broke out. And accidentally, Hercules somehow shot Chiron in the leg with the poison arrow. And so now the immortal, the regular part of him, is fighting the mortal part, because the immortal part can keep living and living, while the mortal part of him is now stuck with a wound that cannot be healed. Would normally kill him, but because he's immortal, he just keeps trucking and trucking. So this is the wound number 2 that's part of the pattern, is that we get wounded by something that is not on purpose. It's something that's an accident. It's something that feels like a betrayal. It's something that feels like something comes out of left field and we don't understand where this is coming from. So this could be a physical wound, like mine was a physical wound that has happened to me. You've had physical wounds that have happened to you, but this can be emotional. This can be mental. This could be a spiritual wound. And it's something that's triggered in an everyday moment, and something that comes in just a way that creates this wound that cannot be healed, is the air quotes that go with that. And so that is when he was launched on his journey. He was raised by Apollo, so he had all of these tools that he could, quote, fix things and heal things. And so he goes on this like 300-year journey of trying to find all the different ways that he can heal this thing. He ends up completely recluse in a cave, removing himself from the world because he can't heal it. But yet people come to him for his herbology and all these other things like that. This is where the little known fact of how did he get out of that cave. People think he went straight to Zeus. No, there's like a 700 and some odd year time. It's his wife. And this is a story I love to share. I don't know if you know, Sophia, the story of Cherico, his wife. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. So here's Cherico. She was a water nymph by most of the things. She's hard to find because it was a very patriarchal. We'll put that aside. I'll stay on that point. But she was a beautiful healer within her own right. And some of the mythology says that she turned herself into a centaur so that she could be with him. And eventually she came to him and she was his caregiver. And she finally said to him that he needed to learn to live with the wound instead of seeing the wound as a source that he needed to fix in order to get back to his life. It was, no, how can we help tend to that wound as much as we can, minimize as much of the, quote, pain and suffering that goes with it, and still honor the rest of your life. She was the healer, the true healer, the healer that worked in wholeness, honoring that sometimes we just have wounds that we cannot always completely erase. And she convinced him to come back into life and to be in life again, and still tending to the parts of him that are, quote, less than perfect. And how do we still engage all of life? So it's her energy that really brings him into the full breadth of the wounded healer archetypal pattern. She's the one who got him to recognize it's not about trying to undo the wound. It's about embracing that wound is a part of you and you still have all the rest of life. And how do you want to live it? And so that's the journey of the wounded healer, is for us to recognize that, hey, wounds are a part of life. They're going to happen intergenerationally to things that we are not planned on. They're going to happen in life because things just go wrong. The question is, how do you want to show up in those moments? How do you want to tend to yourself? Of course, bring in as much health and wellness as possible, but how do you also remember your wholeness. And that's what healing really means. It says, remember that you're whole. And what so often we get stuck in doing is focusing on what's not working, air quotes, right, versus allowing ourselves to see ourselves as whole beings. And that's the journey of the wounded healer. Isn't that beautiful?
That's incredible. Really, really, really. And yes, it is beautiful and it's amazing. And thank you for sharing that. And I definitely want to go into that even more. I think, Michelle, you're going to have to come back. We're going to have a part two and a part three conversation because you are a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Like it's incredible what your journey has brought you to here. And yes, yeah, I think we just have to come back. I'm kind of awestruck. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to go into, let's talk more about the wounded healer archetype because a lot of people, believe that when you're talking about the wounded healer, that it's kind of really rooted in pain rather than healing. So
And I think that's because it's like, sorry for cutting you, it's initiated through pain,
yes,
you know?
yeah,
You can't take that out. And that's where in Carolyn's work, she teaches like there's the healer pattern and then there's the wounded healer pattern. And my experience is it's like there's no way to unring that bell. I think in the past, maybe that was true. Chiron as the asteroid was found in October 77. I can't remember the exact date, sorry, or right off the top of my head, but it's like when he was found and he was seen, it woke up the idea that somehow healing and the wounded healer were separate. It's like it went from the idea that healing is fixing and making ourselves into this perfect form to take out the pain, to have only perfection, only gumdrops and roses. It's like that version of the shaman at the edge of the town that people showed up to. The shaman pulled their wounds out and they got to walk out like just free and they weren't responsible for any of their own journey. That died the moment that, sorry, I still signed because they were teaching me to sign because I was deaf for 2 years. So every once in a while I slip into sign. But he when he was found, to me, archetypally, what that did for the whole world is it woke us all up and it said, hey, you are now an integral part of your healing journey. You are now an integral part of like recognizing that wounds are going to be a part of you. Pain is going to be a part. How do you want to work with that? How do you want to awaken? And then this is where another shamanist term comes, the medicine that's held within that wound. So in shamanism, the medicine that you need, the support you need of how to heal that wound, the wisdom of that is held within the wound itself. And so that's that wounded healer archetypal pattern. It says, hey, it's not about erasing all pain from your life because that's not possible. That would take you out of wholeness. That would be separateness. It's about saying this pain has happened now. Where and how do I want to use this to be of service? Like your beautiful whole community, you've taken an experience that is within your wounded healer and you've created medicine from that and brought that in. And so I think that's the piece. We get stuck in the wound and then we get stuck in that cave for 300 years, metaphorically. And we never realize the second piece because we don't open to that yin energy of Charako coming in there and saying, hey, it's not about I'll get back to my life when my wound is healed. It's like my life and the wound are both a part of me. How do I want to live? And so she wasn't found until 1997. And the astrology on it is like insane. Melanie Reinhart is a beautiful astrologist who has done a lot of work on this, but I'll geek out. I'll restrain myself. I'll rein myself back in. But in that 20 years, it's like we had to wrestle with, are we willing to shift our template for healing? And she came in 97 and was like, yeah, we're missing a piece of this. And this is that yin energy. This is that. It's not about just fixing. This is about wholeness.
And it's so true. It's so very, very, very true. It's accepting everything. And I love how you said, that the answers is in the pain. Like, the wound has everything that we actually need to heal it. Just have to go into that and allow it to guide us. So thank you so much for sharing all that. That is incredible. I said you are an incredible wealth of wisdom. I've just got to take a moment just to breathe it all in. It's like, wow. So, Michelle, when you're working with people, how do you help them to really identify and then begin to heal the parts that feel the most wounded or even disconnected? How do we can really reconnect to that wounded heal part of it?
Yeah, I would say that the number one thing that people come to me for is so that they can get their life back. Like that's the pain. They're like, I feel separated by disease, or I feel separated from this sea of mental anguish, or like I just want to get back to quote, and it's always like to who I am. And what they're really saying is, I want my life to go back to that moment in time where I felt the stars were aligned and everything was fine. And so step number one in that beautiful healing journey is to help them embrace the truth that it's not about going backwards. It's not about trying to reboot a moment that they thought that it was good enough. It's really about allowing themselves to step into that something new is wanting to be born. And so it is that death and rebirth story. It is that idea that, look, we're going to go backwards for a little bit so that we can glean some information from that wound, but we're going to do it differently. We're not going back in there just to rehash it or to relive it. It's what I call that sacred witness journey. It's like we're going in there to find the parts of you that never got a voice so that they can be released and healed and unwound, and you can come back into wholeness instead of separate. And so that's a big piece that I think the wounded healer journey is about. It's like, yes, we're going to go into the wound, but we're going into the wound with the purpose to unlock the medicine, not just to rehash what's in that wound.
Unlock the medicine that is contained within things. And what if someone feels stuck in that pain, that trauma, and they're not able to unlock the medicine because they feel stuck in it? What have you ever experienced, or can you share a small or a significant step that they can take just to start that process?
I think the stuckness is quite normal. Like that's one I just want to say is like to anybody who's feeling stuck and feeling like they're spinning their wheels and they can't quite break free, and they know that they don't want to stay stuck in that wound, but yet they can't see anything but that wound. I just want to honor that and say that's normal. That's part of that pattern too, right? Like he ended up in a cave for 300 years. And so he was significantly stuck, right? Like, and because we're taught that we actually don't have value or don't have worth until we're quote perfect. And so part of the stuckness, I think, is a great opportunity for us to shift a little bit of our perception of what has value within us and what doesn't. Like allowing ourselves to see that we can honor that wound, and we can also honor our life, and we can honor what wants to come from our life. It might not look the same. Chances are, if you're on a wounded healer journey, it's not supposed to look the same. We're not supposed to go back into our life the way that we had it. And so a lot of that stuck energy comes from we're trying to figure out a way to fix it and get us back onto the life trajectory that we thought we were on beforehand. But reality is that part is supposed to die. And so that's one of the hardest things I think about the healer's journey, is opening up to the death and rebirth cycle, opening up to that we're not trying to fix ourselves back to the way we were. We're trying to give birth to a version of us that is desperately wanting, our soul wants us to feel, to experience, and to be with, that we wouldn't be with any other way without that wound. And so the stuck is just it's a sabotory energy. It's a sabotory energy that's just trying to protect us, to keep us in the known version. But it's really about embracing that something new wants to come forward, that we don't always get to know what that is or why that is or how that is. And it's natural for us to be scared of it, because why wouldn't we be? We've been conditioned to be really afraid of the unknown, and to question it and to only compare ourselves to what we know. And this journey is about unbridling all that and letting that all go.
It is incredible, isn't it? And the journey is about letting everything go and not keeping it, but not identifying with it, that it is just part of it, accepting it as a whole. And I love how you talk about the unbridling it all, because I was just going to ask you, like, you've now created the unbridled change method. What inspired that, besides your absolute love for horses and riding them or bringing them into not being bridled, but how has it impacted the life of you and the life of others?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we want to control things, right? That's what the bridle is designed to do on a horse. For those that aren't familiar with that, it's designed to rein them in, to hold them in. If they turn left as a rider, I want that horse to turn left. If I turn right, it's a really clear communication, but it gives the illusion that you're quote unquote in control, and that you're the one guiding this other being's choices. And if you do what's called liberty riding, you take that illusion off. The reality is this is a 1,200-pound horse that has its own sentience, its own thought, feelings, and desires. So if it wants to go left, it's going to go left, irregardless of this little bitty thing that's on the thing. And that's the same thing with change. Like these cycles that we've been talking about, this healer's journey, these initiations, these pain points when they come in, a healing journey. And even when a healing comes into a way of completion, and that's a big air quote, so my body learned how to walk again through riding 3 days a week. It was fabulous. And so it took it about 1.5 years to rebuild new pathways. Ding, gold star body, I could walk again. But in my mind, I still had all of these huge issues. So even though my body was free and it could do what it was designed to, quote, do, there were all these restrictions that were happening, all these ways that I was controlling myself or restricting myself off of different emotions and unhealed traumas in the emotional and mental and spiritual side of me. And so that's the journey of healing. The unbridled change method, the idea is we can't control the outside world. We can't guarantee that when I say I want to go left, the whole world is going to come with me and say, sure, Michelle, that sounds amazing. And it's not even maybe that the version of what I think is the best place to go might not be in the highest good and benefit for me. So then how then do we embrace change? How do we allow ourselves to follow our inner guidance and wisdom, even when it goes against maybe what I personally want? How do we challenge ourselves to get beyond these mental constructs? And what I found in my own healing journey was that it's really about connecting to that inner voice, right? It's connecting into what I call the divine Holy Trinity within, which is me, myself in this lifetime, my soul and all that that entails, and then the divine, and that we're part of all of that, right? And when we can connect into that holy triangle, when we can see ourselves in each one of those parts, then we can let go of the reins a little bit more, because we know we're in all the different parts. So even if it doesn't make sense to me, Michelle, I have lots of what I call suggestion boxes to the universe. I have tons of suggestions that I walk up there and put in this little box, and I'm like, just so you know, I think there's a better way, and I think there could be. But at the meantime, even though I have my suggestion box in the universe, I'm still in my life. I'm still in this form. I'm still working with these parts of Earth School that I feel could be different, should be different, would be different. but yet I'm in it. So now how do I work with that? And how do I find a sense of safety, of believing in myself and feeling connected to that guidance, that there is a guiding force there? And so we got to bridge that gap between feeling victimized and feeling empowered. And that's what the unbridled change method helps us do. It helps us build that bridge through that separation and bring us back into a sense of wholeness, not fixing the world the way I want it to be, about how do I embody as much as my beautiful soul energy as I can in this world as it is right now. That's what Charlotte was up to with Chiron. She was saying, hey, this is part of your world now. You can't hide from it. You can't run from it. And you can't necessarily unring the spell. So how do we want to be in it? And that's what the method is about building that self-worth, one, realizing that we have value, period, full stop. It doesn't come with a perfection or a certain body type or a job or this, that, and the other. We all have the equal same value. And so can we really give ourselves that? Can we trust ourselves to say what we mean and mean what we say? You know, can we give ourselves that same level of beautiful accountability in a loving and compassionate way that's not based off of value because we're already worthy? And if we can give ourselves those two things, the formula is kind of, then we're willing to kind of take off the illusion that there's a bridle on this universe and realize that there's not, and start to then say, okay, then how do I do a liberty ride? How do I swing my leg over this life that is mine, knowing that it's not going to do everything I say or want? And how do I still feel in partnership with it, in union? Right? Because if I sling my leg over that horse and I don't have a bridle on, then how do I go where I want to go? It's connection, it's union, it's partnership with, sometimes the horse says, yeah, that's a really bad decision, Michelle. We're not going left. We need to go straight. And how do I feel in connection and partnership with that? And when I do that, when I can feel like I can have these deep dialogues with these parts of myself that are outside of the little sphere of Michelle, and I start to feel like I am in all of those other aspects of me, then I'm willing to follow that guidance. Then I'm willing to lock myself into that why. And it's lock solid and it's not dependent on perfection, you know? And it's a beautiful sense of settling in and accepting this skin, this form that we have, and really loving it. And it's a beautiful shift. And that's what the Unbridled Change method is designed to do, to help us, yes, have as much health and wellness and abundance and all the things that we want as possible, but also recognizing we're in a much, I don't like the word bigger because it puts a hierarchy in it. I think you know what I mean, Sophia. It's not about a hierarchy. It's like we're in a much bigger sphere of wholeness. And how do we show up in that space? It is absolutely essential that we each show up, because that's, the whole is depending on it, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing. Can I just take a moment, Michelle, just to really honor you? So I'm just breathing in everything that you said. You are truly an incredible example, and I don't know if the example is the right word, but of you're radiating, vibrating that wholeness, living, that you actually embody what you help others. And from going from your experience as a teenager and everything that's happened to you, to now you can see what doing this work and taking on your unbridled method can become, on how it can help you. And I love it how you talked about trying to bridle the universe. It's really, controlling. We do it so much. And I'd never even thought of that in trying to control the universe. We think that we know better than the universe, and putting the universe into where we want to go, where if we can, in Australia, we call it free riding or liberty riding, if we can really just connect with ourselves and trust ourselves, connect with ourselves, connect with the universe, then the journey can be incredible. So
It is.
just really want to honor you and thank you so much for being part of this world and for bringing your gift to Sacred You in the world. So for anyone who is listening or watching our podcast, do yourself a favor and connect with Michelle by clicking on those links below, because it's incredible. And our conversation can go for quite a long time, but Michelle, you definitely have to come back. Have to come back.
I'd love to.
Good. I'd love to know, a little bit what's one of the most surprising lessons that you've learned in your years of guiding others on their healing journey?
I think it's one of the things that took me the longest, which would seem like the simplest thing to recognize. And it's a core belief now that I have, is that the answers for each person of what it is that's going to bring them the most balance and wholeness and wellness, it does not lie in the healer. It lies within the being that you're working with. And time after time, story after story, I have where I thought it could go this way, like this is the way we need to turn. And the universe was like, no, Michelle, this is the way we need to turn. And one specific one that's popping into my head is I had one girl who was working, and I do both equine partner and psychotherapy, and then this work, the healing and coaching work outside of the arena, because not everybody lives where I live, and then not everybody really has the affiliation for horses that I have. But this particular one was with the horses, and she was really struggling. She was having a moment. She was flaring all over the place. She thought that she was a residential treatment facility working with teenagers, and she was about to get adopted, but that was the scariest thing for her because everybody in her life before that had left her, judged her, deemed her unworthy, and kind of threw her back. And so the fact that this family really wanted her, while that should be amazing, it was absolutely terrifying to her. And so she was blowing up, and she blew up with the horse that she had a relationship with, and she was like picking a fight. And she literally started picking things up in the arena and throwing them at the horse. And at first I was like, oh, no, you did not just throw something at my horse, like back down, Chiquita. And I was about ready to like do an intervention because I thought she needed to calm down. The therapist that I was working with thought she needed to calm down. But I looked at the horse. Luckily, the universe grabbed hold of me and was like, Michelle, look at the horse. So I look at the horse, this beautiful off the track thoroughbred that should have been incredibly reactive to a hurling traffic cone coming at it. And he just gently moved to the side, kept grazing on the grass because we were in an outdoor arena with grass in it. And I was like, that doesn't match. And he was like, yeah, no, Michelle, this doesn't match. And he just kept grazing. She was picking up everything, Sophia, that you could pick up in that ring that wasn't like tied down. She would pick it up, and she was just hurling it with every bit of her might towards this horse. And what I realized is that the horse was not only grazing, he was working his way very slowly to her. And there came this moment where she didn't have anything else to pick up and to throw. She had thrown everything that she could throw. And in that moment, this beautiful horse named Barry closed the gap. And at first I thought he was going to run over the girl. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be bad. But he didn't. He instead did the same thing that Schedule did to me. And he put his head up and over her and like pulled her into him and just held her with this beautiful headlock from a horse. And she just started wailing on him and was like, I hate you. I want you to leave. I mean, just cussing him out, all these things. And he just held her. And eventually she just started sobbing. And she kind of collapsed down to the ground, and he followed her with his head down to the ground. And they just stood there as she sobbed and sobbed in a way that she could not have done with any other being. And Barry held that space. And it was my job to hold the bigger space to keep the therapist from going in there and everything else. And I just watched as these two amazing souls just felt into the depth of her fear, her scared, the pain of the wounds that have come before her. And at the end, he kind of lifted her back up because her arms were interlaced over his head. And as she stood, she unburied her head. Her face was just streaked with tears and dust and mud. And she gave him a little kiss. And then she'd been working on this thing called standing in the box, which is the idea that the horse would stay in one spot and she could walk around like a big distance and come back. And the horse has to have enough trust in the human to not leave them. And the human has to have enough trust in the horse that they're willing on their own without being tied to stay there. And she did a big, huge loop all the way around Barry. He didn't move a muscle. He stayed right where he was. He just looked at her. She made a bigger lip, and pretty soon she was like 90 feet out, walking all the way around. He's totally free, at liberty, standing, waiting for her. She comes back. She gives him a kiss. She turns around. She looks at me and she said, he didn't leave. No matter what I did, he didn't leave. That is our soul in our universe. Barry was like her soul incarnate at that moment, being like, sweetie, honey, I'm not going to leave. No matter what happens, no matter how separate you get, this love is always here. And I think that was the moment when I was like, oh, this is it. To be the horse in the session with the clients, right? And that's kind of like my mantra every day, is to help me be the heart of the horse when I'm in session with clients, to be able to hold that space that honors them, that doesn't leave them, no matter how much parts of them are trying to get me to leave them because they're scared, so that the person themselves can come back to them. They can ride that wave and trust them. So that's really an aha moment, came from Barry. I was like, wow, that's a healer, right?
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing it. And it's so very true. You know, and again, horses are incredible, intuitive beings, and so much for healing. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Truly, 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 thank you. And I said, we've got so many more questions, and we haven't even really started to talk about a little bit about, you know, awakening the soul's medicine, like truly going into that. But can I ask you, Michelle, is there any other questions that I could have asked you? And how would have you answered? Or is there anything else that you would like to share?
I think you've asked beautiful questions. I can't really think of anything. The only thing that's coming to maybe kind of wrap up this part one, hopefully we get to speak again, is that to really awaken that soul's medicine, there's a teacher who has passed away in the 90s by the name of Osho. And one of his famous quotes is to not move the way fear forces us to move, but instead move the way love invites us to move. And I think that's the shift. When we can shift from moving in our own inner healing journey from fear, what if this doesn't change? What if this gets worse? What if this doesn't do what I want it to do? What if I don't get the universe to turn left? If we can soften and let that go, then we get to move the way love wants us to move. And love will always try to bring us into as much freedom and balance and wholeness as possible. And so that's one of my quotes that I love to live by, is to try to move the way love invites me to move, and not the way fear forces me to move.
Thank you so much. I'm just writing all that down, and I'm going to be going back and listening to this podcast because I've enjoyed it so much. And again, for anyone else out there, I do encourage you to also re-listen to this and connect with Michelle. Now, obviously, you do clients, you have clients, and you see people from all over the world, even if they don't have horses.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I would say most of my business now is made up of the quote unquote spiritual and healing coaching side, where I do work with people through online platforms, because it's opened everything up since COVID. It did a hard shift, and bringing that in. But I do still do work out at the barn, both with equine psychotherapy and kind of more office-based work. But so you can take a look. My website is the best place to start. I have tons of free resources. I have a YouTube channel, and to help you start moving the way love is calling for you to move.
Thank you ever so much. Truly, this has been an honor, and please do come back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, I'm more than welcome to come back.